Hello. I'm showing you this image right now because today's video is going to be going over something that I think some of you remember when looking at this painting. If you don't know what this painting is, this is a painting that was made in 1999 by a Japanese artist, which eventually made its way onto the internet. Now, some of you probably remember this painting that accompanied a creepypasta back in 2004 called Tomino's Hell. Tomino's Hell was a poem made in 1919 by a Japanese poet named Saizo Yaso. The urban legend surrounding this poem was that anyone who recited this poem out loud in Japanese would be condemning their soul to eternal punishment in hell. The early 2000s were all about cursed images and creepypastas and people really taking their chances. But today's video is not actually going to be going over the poem. Today's video is going to be going over this painting because over time, as that poem made the rounds on 2chan and made its way onto creepypasta, somebody decided to accompany this poem with this painting. So I wanted to do a deep dive into this painting because the image that it left on the internet is something that people just didn't forget. It's the Halloween season now, and I can't think of a better time to share something dark from the internet. So kick back and relax and join me going down the rabbit hole of the painting called I Cannot Be a Bride Anymore. And maybe grab some snacks in the meantime or some Halloween Tokyo treats, which is the sponsor for this video. Now that spooky season's here, this month is all about Halloween. And if you want to try Japanese Halloween snacks, you can get it by subscribing to Tokyo Treat. What is Tokyo Treat? It's a fun and exclusive monthly snack box packed with Japan's coolest and craziest treats. Each month you'll get a rare Kit Kat flavor, limited edition chips, noodles, and the latest treats shipped worldwide from Japan straight to your door. It's the closest thing to shopping at a Japanese konbini without leaving the home. My personal favorite were honestly the Kit Kats. It's very Japan, I know, but it is, because I don't know any other place that has apple pie flavored Kit Kats, and I'm telling you, these things are pretty bomb. Each box also comes with a cultural booklet that shows off all the details, allergy info, and fun facts about Japanese Halloween traditions, and it's the perfect way to get into the spooky spirit while enjoying rare Japanese snacks that you really can't find anywhere else. So, if you'd like to try any of these treats and more, use my code AKI for $5 off your first box. Don't blink. What you're seeing before you is a series of pretty disturbing paintings, all made by the same artist named Yuko Tatsushima. Like many of you, I stumbled across this painting of hers. Funny enough, it was actually through listening to a Merzbow album, which honestly kind of fit the theme. Headphone users be warned. I wanted to know more about the painting more than I wanted to know about Merzbow at the time, and so I did a deep dive back then. And today is the first time I'm really going deep into her art. Yuko Tatsushima is an artist known for very raw and disturbing imagery. I noticed a lot of these paintings often depict women in states of violence, distortion, and despair, which forces us the viewers to confront different themes, such as trauma, silence, and social pressure. I also believe that a lot of these paintings might be a statement about Japanese culture, which we'll get into in a little bit. Now, although her art has spread very widely across the internet, Yuko herself has remained mostly a mystery. We know her best through her paintings, and each piece feels like a glimpse into something society tries to hide. Before we go back to this one, let's look at some of her other paintings, like this one. This is called Red Laugh. When I first saw this, I immediately felt very uncomfortable because at the center is a woman surrounded and pierced by what looks like shards of broken glass. And the glass doesn't really just sit in the background, it looks as if it's closing in on her, sort of giving the impression that her entire world has just shattered. And for us the viewers, it sort of creates a sense of claustrophobia of being trapped inside the chaos with her. Her expression is what I think makes this painting so disturbing. Her mouth is so twisted into something caught between a smile smile and a grimace. It's like she's laughing and crying. It feels very forced and unnatural, like she's trying to convince herself, or maybe even us, that she's fine, when clearly she's not. And the contradiction unsettles the viewer because it reminds us of just how people often hide their feelings and mask it behind humor or maybe even endurance. And then there's the physical details on her body, which I think makes this painting even more jarring. Her neck is cruelly stitched shut with thick black lines. It's hard not to react to this detail because it almost makes your throat tighten just looking at it. On a more symbolic level, I would say that her stitched throat represents silencing. I would say that this kind of shows us how trauma and abuse often silences us from wanting to say what we really think. It's as if we're so conditioned to not want to share those things with other people, and instead we would rather hide behind it with humor, which in this case you can clearly see with this woman, but it's so obvious that it's painful. And then there's her missing left eye, which is another detail that draws me in. The empty eye socket is really disturbing, not only for obvious reasons, but it's also loaded with a lot of meaning in my opinion. A missing eye is a trait that is often seen in a lot of media, but especially throughout Japanese folklore and literature, and even anime. A lot of times it represents trauma, denial, or being forced to see the world only through a certain lens. As with the rest of the canvas, like I mentioned before, it sort of looks like glass shards. Some pieces reflect light and others seem like it's coated with blood. It creates that sense that this environment of this painting is just very hostile, that every surface around her could cut. And through all of this, she just laughs. It's the kind of laugh that makes you uncomfortable because it doesn't belong. It feels like despair masquerading as strength. A lot of users online described this moment as very haunting because this image captures that very fragile point where someone is breaking but still trying to hold it together. Red laugh just works because it makes people feel conflicted. Yuko shows us how suffering can be hidden behind masks, and how those masks can be just as painful to wear as the wounds themselves. Now, this next photo was honestly very uncomfortable for me to try and look at deeply, but this piece is called Ecoetic Coffin. Again, by Yuko Tatsushima. This painting, we are once again confronted by something very unbearable to look at because we are looking at the open casket of a young girl. So right away you notice that her body rests still, but normally at a funeral where there's prep for the deceased to look like they're sleeping, her body on the other hand has absolutely no softness in her death. For example, her skin is drained of color, her lips painted faintly blue, her eyes are fixed in this very unsettling stare. All in all, she just does not look like a child sleeping peacefully. She just looks like what she is, gone. Her face itself is very haunting. For example, you'll notice the little detail of her lips hanging open just slightly. It almost looks like she wanted to say her last words but couldn't. And then her blank stare. It denies any comfort. And instead they force us to see her as a person, specifically a very young girl who carried a lot of weight to her death. And you can feel that weight even more when you notice all the objects that surround her. So, for example, the coffin is lined with flowers, but instead of lifting the mood, they sort of feel like thin veils covering something darker. It's like the flowers became part of the nightmare that everyone is going through. And then beside her body are her belongings. So the first item we see is an envelope given by somebody off to the side marked with her nickname. The next item we see is something that looks like a music player or a toy or possibly a charm, also an object that you would expect of someone of her age. But the most striking object of all is the third object, a pack of cigarettes, specifically the Jeton cigarettes. And when you look at all of these symbols together, it's clear that her death was anything but innocent. All of these objects around her tells us, the viewers, of little hints that she lived a life under pressure, and she probably lived a life where she was forced to grow up too soon. Especially when you look back at the cigarettes, it makes a statement. They're not an object that you would expect to find near a child's body. And not to mention, these were probably placed there by attendees. So someone close to her probably knew that she smoked regularly enough for them to notice, and that they placed it next to her body. And then there's the people mourning around her. They're not calm or composed. They're stricken, horrified, and broken by the sight that they're looking at. Now, one figure that you'll notice to the very left is likely her mother. She's about to offer a single red rose as an offering of love, yet this gesture sort of feels very small and fragile against the weight of the tragedy in the room. The rose is a symbol of tenderness, but here it's just too overpowered and swallowed by all the sorrowness in the air. I think what makes this piece so disturbing is not so much about the depiction of death, but it's the way that Yuko uses her art to comment on the struggles of young people. So when you look at all of this as a whole, the painting just becomes bigger than the one figure in the center. It's basically a statement about an entire generation of youth forced into adulthood too quickly, like they're left to navigate struggles that they should have never faced. I think this painting also tells us that death is not always about peace. Unfortunately, it's sometimes about injustice. Ecoetic Coffin is a painting that refuses to soften itself. It just forces us, the viewers, to look at it for what it is, and more importantly, at the conditions of what causes somebody to get to this point. The girl in this picture is not just a body in a coffin. She's a reminder of how the young are often asked to bear too much, too early. If you've made it this far in the video, congratulations, you're about to see our third painting and what I think is probably Yuko's second most scariest painting. This piece is called White Prison, and it is perhaps, in my opinion, one of Yuko's more psychologically layered works. So, at first glance, we see a woman seated very stiffly in a cramped room. Starting off with the walls and the floor, you can see that they're decorated with flowers and pillows, making the space almost feel like a child's bedroom. But the sweetness of the room clashes not only with the art style, but with the figure at the center, who sits frozen and her eyes are rolled back unnaturally, and her body is marked with deep cuts across her chest, her arm, and her face. The wounds on her almost look like either self-inflicted or maybe it's brutal violence imposed on her. The next thing that you'll notice is her joints. Her limbs are jointed much like a porcelain doll. Her body is very segmented, fragile, and artificial. The woman in the photo doesn't look 100% like a doll, but she's definitely no longer human. It's almost like she's in the process of being turned into an object, which reminded me of the fact that across a lot of cultures, dolls have actually long been seen as vessels for spirits. But Yuko flips that tradition on its head with this painting. The woman that we're looking at is not a doll that's inhabited by a spirit, but rather she looks more like a human that's being forced into the state of a doll. Now, zooming out of the girl, we'll look off to the side and notice this small piece of paper next to an incense candle. This piece of paper, I found out, is actually called a kaimyo, which is a Buddhist name given to someone when they die. Each character on this piece of paper is chosen by the priest that symbolizes a virtue. This little detail has showed me everything I needed to know about this painting, because what we're looking at is actually not a woman posed like a doll in a suffocating room. We're actually looking at a memorial. The incense at the bottom next to the kaimyo declares that she is already dead. And even though this woman is no longer alive, even in death her existence has been reduced to a ritual. Somebody has purposely posed her in this room in this way to make her look like this pure and beautiful doll, surrounded by flowers and pillows that decorate the room. I think that this painting in some way is commentating on how women are objectified, especially in Japan, in not only life, but also in death. So for me, I honestly think White Prison is one of Yuko's sharpest critiques of Japan's cultural view of women, and it reflects the pressure to appear cute and obedient and doll-like, whether alive or dead. And now for Yuko Tatsushima's most well-known piece, titled I Cannot Be a Bride Anymore. This is the painting that made her go viral and is still the one that most people associate with her name. And like many of her works, the canvas is filled to the brim with very violent black and red strokes that look like wounds across the surface. They don't just surround the figure, but they cut through her, and it's almost as if the violence of the world has been carved into her body. To me, this whole painting felt very chaotic and unstable, like it's on the verge of ripping apart. And call me over dramatic for this, but when I first saw this painting's aura was just so hostile that I honestly felt like it would harm me just by looking at it, which is, I think, a feeling that everyone who saw this on the internet, especially when it first came out, felt, which tells me that even though we don't know exactly why it was this painting that was chosen for the poem on the creepypasta, we can all definitely say that we felt something very sinister from this.
Now, before I go into the details of this painting, if you guys would like to support me in what I do, you guys can follow me on Patreon by following the link in the description below. You guys will get exclusive access to videos that I normally can't get away with on YouTube, and I also write a physical letter per month to certain patrons who sign up using stationery that you can only get in Japan. And if you guys would like more details on that and more, you guys can follow the link to my Patreon below. Now, going back into the details of this, we see in the painting at the center stands a woman. She's standing upright, but she doesn't look strong, and her chest is slightly exposed with her body vulnerable, and if you look down to the groin area, you can clearly see that there is blood dripping. Regardless of all of the red and black scratches, there is a clear distinction that there has been harm done to her in that area. And this little detail is not symbolic in some abstract way. This is a very direct message that this painting is about sexual violence, and how its mark lingers very permanently on the body and the identity of the woman. Now, what takes the viewer in even more is her eyes. Her eyes are the most striking detail out of this entire painting. They are wide, they are sharp and unflinching, and they look right into your soul. They don't allow you to look past her suffering. It feels like we're watching the exact moment that she is realizing what has been done to her and how society will see her, which is the title of the piece, that she cannot be a bride anymore. Now, this is a very profound title because in Japan especially, even though in many cultures they all feel this way, a bride is still often idealized as a very pure, obedient, and untouched woman. Even when the purity is stolen through violence, victims are very often treated as if they are tainted and their worth has been diminished. Victims are made to feel like their trauma is their fault. And that is the core of this painting. A woman who has been violated is punished not just by her abuser, but by society itself. So in this artwork, the brushstrokes distort the body, tearing her apart until she looks fractured, as though her entire world has collapsed around her. You can tell just by looking at her that she's in pieces, but she's still standing. And even just the way that her stance is, combined with that piercing gaze, is what makes this painting so powerful. You can tell just by looking at her that she is broken, but refuses to disappear. She exists as both a victim and an accuser, demanding us, the viewers, to acknowledge of what has happened to her. And more than a personal portrait, I Cannot Be a Bride Anymore is a statement about how women who experience sexual violence are treated. It holds up a mirror to the cruelty of a culture that ties a woman's worth to her purity and then blames her when the purity is taken from her by force. Her wide eyes tells us that she understands her damnation and she will never be seen as a bride to anyone. The only thing that she will be married to from this point on is to her own misery and loneliness. It's not a painting that tries to soften its message. It is a very brutal and direct and unforgettable piece by Yuko.
So many of you are probably wondering now, where is Yuko Tatsushima now? The truth is that we really don't know. Since the blow up of her career, she's actually stepped away from the spotlight. And the only things that are left of her are these paintings that continue to circulate online, forever attached to poems and curses and creepypastas, which all in all, if you really think about it, I can only really feel sorry for her. This is an artist that wanted to express her pain and her agony and abuse through her artwork. And somehow the internet has completely changed that into something it wasn't. Let me know of what you guys think of her artwork in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!